day. This is Group 1 reporting to you about a law that signifies the importance of chemistry in many chemistry professionals. This is the Republic Act number 10657 or the Professional Chemistry Law.
Chemical analysis is very important in many industries, such as food and beverages, research, and biochemicals. Hence, it is important to build a protection or regulation of maintaining the operations of these laboratories. This is as well to give importance to the profession of chemists. Thus, the government passed a law in favor of these issues.
This act was passed by the House of Representatives as House Bill number 5016 on October 26, 2014, adopted by the Senate as an amendment to Senate Bill number 914 on January 26, 2015, and signed by the late former President Benigno S. Aquino III on March 27, 2015. It was operational on April 12, 2015. Currently, there are 285 companies that are permitted to operate chemical laboratories under licensed chemist professionals. This information can be accessed under the Integrated Chemist of the Philippines website. The law comprises of 6 articles and 51 sections. Article 1 refers to the title, policies, and definitions of the law. Article 2 refers to the Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry. Article 3 comprises the licensure examination and registration. Article 4 covers the general provisions covered by the law. Article 5 contains the transitory provisions, and Article 6 ends with the final provision. The importance of this chemistry law is to facilitate the operation of laboratories performing chemical analysis in the Philippines. A certificate of authority to operate is required for all chemical laboratories, plus a set of requirements and provisions were set in order to advise and practice the regulations on these chemical laboratories. The requirements of the chemistry law states that only firms, corporations, government agencies, and academic institutions that have been legally mandated by the board and present a license certificate may operate a chemical laboratory or participate in the practice of chemistry or chemical analysis in the Philippines. For the requirement to secure the certificate of authority for firms, corporations, and government agencies to operate, this is presented in the implementing rules and regulations of RA 10657, Rules 11, Section 46, and the rules and regulations implementing Section 35 of the said Act on the issuance of certificates to operate chemical laboratories and other related establishments. Its grace period of compliance is 3 years after the law took effect or until April 12, 2018. Only registered chemists and registered chemical technicians with valid certificate of registration and professional identification cards or PIC approved by the board and the commission are permitted to practice chemistry inside the chemical laboratory. Only registered chemists can direct a chemical analysis laboratory and certify analysis certification. Operation can only be in full effect when it is legally signed by a section of certificates of analysis. All new appointments to the following positions or designations must be made by registered chemists with valid CORs or PICs, heads of chemical laboratories, supervisors of chemical work in laboratories, or signatories to a chemical analysis. Registered chemists and registered chemical technicians working in chemical analysis laboratories are obligated to hazard pay, insurance, and legal assistance. To govern the requirement of the law to all operating agencies and companies, the Certificate of Authority of Operate provided penalties and warnings if ever any of the requirements or regulations above were violated. This is quoted under Section 39 of the law, implying that the president or the highest ranking officer of the corporation shall be held responsible. These individuals were sentenced to imprisonment for a period of not less than 1 year, but not more than 1 year, or a fine of not less than 1 million pesos, or both at the discretion of the court.
Before we proceed further to the details of the Republic Act 10657 or the Professional Chemistry Law, let us discuss first its first two articles. I am JP Arcelin and I will be discussing the first article, which is the title, Policy and Definitions, as well as the second article, which is the Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry. And now let's proceed to the articles. Starting off to the article number 1, the title, Policy and the Definitions. For the section 1, the title, this act shall be known as the Chemistry Profession Act. Second section, the Declaration of Policy. Chemistry is vital to the public safety, national economy, and the protection of the environment. It is therefore the policy of the state to promote, to regulate, and to protect the professional practice of chemistry, as well as to ensure the continued development and high international standards of the practice of the chemistry in the Philippines. For the section 3, definition of terms, we are going to define the 6 terms for this section. First is the chemistry, registered chemist, registered chemical technician, chemical analysis, chemical synthesis, and chemical laboratory. Chemistry refers to the study, analysis, modification, and calculations of physical, chemical, or biochemical properties of matter. Chemistry includes the atomic, molecular, surface, and supramolecular composition and structure of matter. Properties and reactions, the change which undergoes, the energy involved, and the conditions under which changes occur. Biochemistry, which is defined as the study of the chemical compounds and processes in biological organisms, is included within the scope of chemistry for purposes of this act. Second is the registered chemist. Registered chemist refers to any person who is engaged in the professional practice of chemistry, as defined herein, who is duly registered with the Board of Chemistry and the Professional Regulation Commission. A registered chemist shall have the authority to undertake the professional practice of chemistry. Third is the registered chemical technician. Chemical technician or registered chemical technician refers to any person who is engaged in the work of chemical analysis as defined herein and who is duly registered with the Board of Chemistry. The fourth term is the chemical analysis. The chemical analysis refers to the physical, chemical, or biochemical procedure which involves the following and related techniques. First is the measurement of properties such as power of hydrogen pH, oxidation reduction potential, density, atomic or molecular weight, and others. Second is the use of methods such as titration, gravimetric analysis, electrochemical measurements, spectroscopy, chromatography, and others. Third is the determination of the atomic or molecular quantity of one or more components of a substance. Fourth is the determination of the atomic, molecular surface, or supramolecular nature or structure of a substance. Fifth is the preparation of the sample for chemical analysis. Sixth is the separation and or purification of a mixture into components using techniques such as distillation, crystallization, density, reactivity, extraction, adsorption, size exclusion, affinity, chromatography, and others. Seventh is the calculation of physical, chemical, or biochemical properties, or concentrations of chemicals or biochemicals. Eighth is the computational methods applied to chemically or biochemically related matters, such as molecular design, molecular modeling, and chemometrics, and others. And ninth is other analytical methods which characterize matter at the atomic, molecular, supramolecular level. The fifth term is the chemical synthesis. Chemical synthesis refers to the preparation of a compound or chemical entity from its elements or from other compounds or chemical entities by one or more chemical reactions. Synthesis, as defined herein, refers to both chemical synthesis, which may use chemical catalysts, and biochemical synthesis, which uses enzymes and other biological compounds to promote a reaction. And lastly, the chemical laboratory. Chemical laboratory refers to a facility where activities described in section 3D and 3E are performed. Such activities carried out outside of a chemical laboratory. For example, a factory, mobile laboratory, or field analysis shall likewise be considered a chemical laboratory. The head of the chemical laboratory shall be a registered chemist. For the fourth section, the scope of the professional practice of chemistry. The professional practice of chemistry covers the performance of service-related public interest, public safety, legal, or regulatory matters. The following and similar activities shall be functions of the registered chemist. First is the performance of a chemical analysis or chemical synthesis. Certification of a chemical analysis or chemical synthesis. Inspection of a laboratory with respect to its chemical or biochemical activities. Fourth is the certification of a laboratory with respect to its chemical and biochemical activities. Fifth is the supervision of a chemical laboratory. Sixth is the supervision of a chemical analysis or chemical synthesis, whether or not performed in a laboratory. Seventh is the teaching, lecturing, and reviewing of a professional chemistry subject in the curriculum of Bachelor of Science in Chemistry or a degree or in a subject in the chemistry licensure examination given in any college, university, or training or review center, or any educational institution of certification body. Eighth is the consultation, investigation, or research concerning physico-chemical or biochemical matters which involve public interest, public safety, laws, and regulations. For these purposes, the registered chemist must affix one signature, licensure number, and official seal to any certification reported submitted. Ninth is the sale of the chemical apparatus, and chemical equipment. 10th is the supervision of the sale of chemical apparatus, or chemical equipment, and lastly, the functions related to the management of chemicals, such as chemical safety, chemical waste management, pollution control, and the like. For the fifth section, which is the scope of the professional practice of chemical analysis. The scope of the professional practice of chemical analysis shall be limited to the performance of physico-chemical or biochemical analysis, chemical or biochemical analysis, synthesis, and the sale of chemical apparatus, or chemical equipments. And now let's proceed to the article number 2, the Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry. Section 6 of the article number 2, composition of the board, states that there is hereby created a Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry, hereinafter referred to as the board, under the administrative control and supervision of the Professional Regulation Commission, hereinafter referred to as the Commission, which shall be composed of one chairperson and 2 members appointed by the President of the Philippines from a list of 3 nominees or recommendees for each position ranked by the Commission, from a list of 5 nominees for each position submitted by the Accredited Professional Organization, APO, of Chemists. Section 7 of the article number 2, Powers and Duties of the Board, states that the board shall have the following powers and duties. First is to supervise and regulate the practice of the chemistry profession in the Philippines in accordance with the provisions with this act. Second is to determine the requirements and evaluate the qualifications of applications for registration and renewal of licensed and registered chemists and registered chemical technicians. Third is to prescribe the subjects in the licensure examination, determine the syllabi of the subjects, and their relative weights construct the test questions in the examinations and submit the examination results to the Commission. Fourth is to issue, together with the Commission, certificates of recognition or registration rather to persons admitted to the practice of professions of chemistry and chemical analysis. Fifth is to oversee the conduct of the Continuing Professional Development or the CPD program for professional chemists and chemical technicians. Sixth is to determine in consultation with the APO or the accredited professional organizations of for chemistry profession, private industry, relative government agencies, the requirements of chemistry laboratories, both private and government, and other entities engaged in the practice of chemistry for registration or renewal of permit, and to issue, together with the Commission, the certificate of authority to operate to those that satisfy the said requirements. Seventh is to conduct an on-site inspection of chemistry laboratories and other entities engaged in the practice of chemistry and seek assistance of the accredited professional organizations in order to carry out these functions. Eight is to inquire into the conditions affecting the practice of the professions and to adopt measures for the enhancement and maintenance of high professional, ethical, and technical standards. Ninth is to adopt and promulgate the Code of Ethics and Code of Good Governance for the practice of chemistry. 10th is to issue sub buena ad testificandum and sub buena duces tecum to secure the attendance of witnesses or the production of documents in connection with the administrative case of the board. 11th is to hear and decide administrative cases filed against chemists, chemical technicians, and the owner of or the administrators of chemical laboratories. The hearing shall be presided over the chairpersons or a member of a board with assistance of an attorney of the commission. Any decision shall be decided by the majority of the board. The decision of the board may be appealed to the commission not later than 15 or 15th day from notice, otherwise such decision shall be final and executory. 12 is to administer oaths in connection with the performance as it functions. 13th is to adopt the implementing rules and regulations of this act. And last is to perform such other functions as may be necessary in order to implement the provisions of the act. Section 8 of the Article 2, Qualifications of the Chairperson and Members of the Board states that a chairperson and the members of the board must meet the following requirements, such as a citizen and resident of the Philippines, the good moral character or sound mind, holder of at least a master's degree in chemistry by a chemistry institution recognized by the Commission on Higher Education or the CHED, or by a reputable foreign university. Fourth is a registered chemist who has been in active practice for at least 10 years. A person who does not have any pecuniary interest, directly or indirectly, in a higher educational institution conferring an academic degree necessary for admission to the practice of chemistry, or where review classes in preparation for licensure examination are being offered or conducted, nor shall one be a member of the faculty or the administrative thereof. A member of a good standing in the accredited professional organization, not an officer or trustee of the accredited professional organization, and lastly, not a convicted by court of competent jurisdiction of an offense involving moral turpitude. Section 9 of the Article 2, Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry, Term of Office states that the chairperson and members of the board shall hold office for 3 terms, or 3 years rather, from the date of appointment, or until the successors shall have been appointed. They may be reappointed for another term of 3 years immediately after the expiry of the term, provided that their terms should be more than 2 terms or not more than 6 years, whichever is longer, provided further that The first board under this act shall hold these terms of the office. The chairperson for 3 years, the first member of 2 years, and the second member of 1 year, provided finally that any appointee to a vacant seat with an unexpired period shall only serve such period. The chairperson and the members of the board shall duly take the oaths of the office. Section 10 of the Article 2, compensation of the board, states that the chairperson and members of the board shall receive such compensation and allowances comparable to that being received by the chairperson and members of other professional regulatory boards under the Commission, as provided for the General Appropriations Act. Section 11 of the Article 2, custodian of the board, states that all records of the boards, including applications for examinations, examination papers and results, minutes of meetings, deliberation of administrative and other investigative cases involving the board shall be kept by the Commission. The Commission shall designate the Secretary of the Board and shall provide secretariat and other support services to implement the provisions of the Act. Section 12 of the Article number 2, which is the grounds for suspension of the chairperson, states that the President, upon the recommendation of the Commission after due process and administrative investigation conducted by the Commission, may remove or suspend a chairperson or a member of the board on any of the following grounds. First is the gross neglect, incompetence, or dishonesty in the discharge of one's duty. Second is the violation of any of the causes, grounds, and the prohibited acts provided in the Act and the offenses of the revised Penal Code, Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, and other laws. And third is the manipulation and rigging of the licensure examination results or disclosures of examination questions prior to conduct the examination or tampering of the grades. The Commission in the conduct of the investigation shall be guided by Section 7 of the Republic Act number 8981, otherwise known as the PRC Modernization Act of 2000. The rules on administrative investigation and the applicable provisions of the new rules of court. Lastly, for the Article number 2, Section 3 of the Article 2 annual report of or an annual meeting states that the board shall submit an annual report to the Commission after the close of each fiscal year, giving a detailed account of the proceedings of the board during the year and embodying such recommendations to the Commission as the board may desire to make. At least once a year, the board shall meet with the accredited professional organizations, representatives of departments of chemistry in higher educational institutions, and the CHED to discuss matters pertinent to the professional practice of chemistry.
I am Andre Nicole Aguila, and now we are going to discuss the first half of Article 3, the licensure examination and registration.
Section 14 of Article 3, which is the Certificate to Practice Chemistry and Chemical Analysis, states that no person is allowed to practice or offer to practice as a chemist or chemical technician without having previously obtained a certificate of registration from the board and a professional identification card. For Section 15, which is the requirement for registration as chemist and chemical technician, it states that unless otherwise provided in this Act, all applicants for registration to practice chemistry and chemical analysis in the Philippines must pass the licensure examination prescribed herein. Section 16 of Article 3, which is the qualifications of an applicant for chemist, it states that any person applying for admission to the chemistry examination must be, first, a Filipino citizen and resident or a foreign citizen from a country or state that has reciprocity with the Philippines in the practice of chemistry. Second, you should have a good moral character and a clear mind. Third, be a graduate of any educational institution, and the holder of a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry or an allied degree, the curricula of which are under the academic supervision of the CHED, provided, however, that the applicant must have earned at least 60 university units in chemistry, which shall include all professional chemistry courses, provided further that the allied degree and its curriculum must have passed the Board of Evaluation, and prior to the issuance of the certificate of registration, all persons seeking to practice as registered chemists or registered chemical technicians must take an oath before the board or any officer authorized by the commission. Lastly, you should have never been convicted by a court of competent jurisdiction of a crime or an offense involving moral turpitude. For Section 17 of Article 3, which is the scope of examination for chemists, analytical chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, inorganic chemistry, and physical chemistry shall be covered on the chemistry licensure examination, provided, however, that the relative weight of any subject shall not exceed 30% or be less than 15% of the total. The board may modify the scope of the board examination to reflect changes in chemistry and professional chemistry practice. The board must consult with the CHED and the APO for chemistry in this case. Chemistry subject and topic revisions must be announced by the board at least 2 years before they are included in the board examination. Section 18 of Article 3, which is the qualifications of an applicant for chemical technician, states that an applicant must meet the following requirements in order to be authorized to practice the profession of chemical technician. These requirements include: first, be a Filipino citizen or a citizen of a foreign country that grants Filipinos the corresponding privilege. Second, they should have a sound moral character and mind. And third, they should have successfully completed at least 30 units of undergraduate chemistry courses from a CHED or Technical Education Skills Development Authority, also known as TESDA. General chemistry, analytical chemistry, and organic chemistry courses should include both lecture and laboratory components. The application must be accompanied by a certified true copy of the applicant's transcript of records. For Section 19 of Article 3, which is the scope of examination for chemical technician, states that the chemical technician licensure examination will cover practical aspects of laboratory work in analytical chemistry and organic chemistry, with equal weighing in each chemistry subject. For the Section 20 of Article 3, which is holding of examination, candidates desiring to practice chemistry and chemical technician in the Philippines must take an examination at least once a year on the date and location set by the Commission in accordance with the PRC Modernization Act of 2000. Section 21, which is the examination fees, states that before being allowed to take the chemistry examination, an applicant must pay any fees that the Commission may impose. Section 22, ratings in the licensure examination. First is the chemist examination. If the examiner receives the following ratings, the Board and Commission will issue certificate of registration. The examinee must obtain a general average of at least 70% and no rating less than 50% in any subject provided. However, that if the examinee passes any two subjects, the examinee will automatically qualify as a chemical technician. And for the chemical technician examination, the examinee must have an overall average of at least 70% and no subject with a score of less than 50%. The examination results must be released no later than 10 days after the last day of the examination. Section 23 of Article 3, which is the exemption from examination for chemists, holders of a doctoral degree in chemistry from a recognized university are eligible to apply for registration as chemists without having to pass the board's examination. They must submit a copy of their undergraduate and graduate diplomas, transcripts, and doctoral thesis cover pages, provided, however, that such individuals demonstrate that they have been actively engaged in the practice of chemistry. The board may require the presentation of the doctoral thesis as well as the other evidence of chemistry competence and achievement. Section 24 of Article 3, Issuance of Temporary or Special Permit. On proper application to the board may issue a temporary or special permit to practice chemistry to the following individuals. First, foreign-based chemists who are recognized as experts in a specific field of chemistry and who are invited by the Republic of the Philippines for consultation or a specific project, provided, however, that their practice is limited to that work. Second, on a direct hire or exchange basis, foreign-based chemists who have distinguished themselves in their respective fields of specialization are hired as professors or lecturers on chemistry subjects by Philippine schools, colleges, institutes, or universities. The temporary or special permit must state the validity period, which cannot exceed 3 years. Section 25 of Article 3, the professional oath, states that all persons to be admitted to the practice as registered chemists and registered chemical technicians are required to take their oath before the board or any officer authorized by the Commission prior to the issuance of their certificate of registration.
Before we move on, the succeeding sections of Article 3 of the Professional Chemistry Law that will be discussed here are primarily focused on the registration as well as the guidelines that should be followed by newly registered chemists and chemical technicians upon passing the licensure exam. These sections cover matters on registration, along with the rules that has to be followed before and during the practice of chemistry profession. For Section 26, this is the issuance of Certificate of Registration for Chemists and Chemical Technician. A Certificate of Registration is issued to all examinees who have passed the licensure examination. The Certificate of Registration contains the full name of the registrant, the registration number, as well as the signature of the chairperson of the commission and the chairperson of and members of the board. This is authenticated by the official seal of both the Commission and the Board. Moving on to Section 27, which is the issuance of Professional Identification Card both for chemist and chemical technician. A Professional Identification Card for chemist is issued to holders of valid Certificate of Registration as chemist, and a Professional Identification Card for chemical technician is issued to holders of valid Certificate of Registration as chemical technician. The Professional Identification Card contains the full name of the registrant, the registration number, as well as the signature of the chairpersons of the Commission and the Board. This is also authenticated by the official seal of the Commission and the Board. The Professional Identification Card is valid for a period of 3 years, which is subject to renewal. For Section 28, this is the indication of numbers of Certificate of Registration and Professional Tax Receipt. So all registered chemists are required to indicate the Certificate of Registration or the CR number, as well as the Professional Tax Receipt or the PTR number, as well as their respective dates and places of issuance and their expiration dates on all official documents that they will issue. Next, Section 29 This is the revocation or suspension of the certificate of registration and cancellation of temporary or special permit. This section states that the board has the power to revoke or suspend the certificates of registration of a registered chemist or to cancel a temporary or special permit granted to a foreign chemist based on the following grounds. First, any act of misrepresentation, dishonesty, unethical conduct, or gross incompetence in connection with the performance of chemistry services such as defined in this act or any act inimical to the chemistry profession. Second, immorality or commission of any act involving moral turpitude. Third, conviction by final judgment of a court of competent jurisdiction of any criminal offense. Or fourth, judicial declaration that the former is of unsound mind. Aside from this, the board also has the power to reissue revoked certificates. Moving on to Section 30, which is membership in the Accredited Professional Organization, or APO. Registered chemists and chemical technicians are required to maintain regular and associate membership, respectively, in the APO. So for Section 31, states the Continuing Professional Development, or CPD. The CPD program guidelines for chemistry and chemical analysis shall be prescribed and promulgated by the board subject to the approval of the commission. The board shall create a CPD council to administer the program, and they shall be composed of a chairperson coming from the board, a member from the APO, and a member from the academe. Moving on to Section 32, which is the roster of chemists and chemical technicians. This section states that the commissioner shall keep a roster of all registered chemists and chemical technicians containing their names, registration numbers, as well as places of business. It is also updated regularly and can be made available to all interested parties. For Section 33, which is the seal of a registered chemist, it states that upon registration, every registered chemist has to obtain a seal as prescribed by the board with the label Registered Chemist, bearing the registrant's name and registration number. All official documents or reports that require the certification or signature of the registered chemist has to be stamped with the latter's personal seal. Next, for Section 34, which is foreign reciprocity. This section states that no foreign chemist is allowed to be given a certificate of registration or professional license and professional identification card, be entitled to any of the privileges under this act unless the country or state of which the foreign chemist is a subject or citizen permits Filipino chemists to practice within its territorial limits on the same basis as the subjects or citizens of said country or state. So moving on to Section 35, which is the certificate of authority to operate for firms, corporations, and government agencies. It states here that only firms, corporations, and government agencies duly authorized by the board that hold a valid certificate may operate a chemical laboratory or engage in the practice of chemistry or chemical analysis in the Philippines, provided that such chemical practice is carried out only by registered chemists or registered chemical technicians holding valid certificates of registration and professional identification cards issued by the board. Next, for Section 36, which is the requirements for Certificate of Authority to Operate, it states that the requirements for the issuance of the Certificate of Authority to operate a chemical laboratory or to engage in the practice of chemistry or chemical analysis are issued as board resolutions, after being set by the board themselves in consultation with other relevant entities and APO. And lastly, for Section 37, which is the roster of chemical laboratories and related entities. This section states the Commission keeps a roster of all chemical laboratories and entities engaged in the practice of chemistry, including their business addresses and registration numbers, and is also updated regularly. So these are all of the sections in Article 3 of the Professional Chemistry Law.
Good day, I am Maria Regina Gian Aledia, and I will be discussing the Articles 4, 5, and 6 of the Republic Act number 10657. Article 4 is the general provisions. Section 38 is the penal clause for the professional practice of chemistry and chemical analysis. This states that professional practice of chemistry or chemical analysis should not be undertaken without a valid certificate of registration and professional IDR or identification card. This involves the persons who practice chemistry not having a valid certificate of registration, professional identification, or temporary or special permit. This also includes the persons who uses certificate, license number, seal, or identity of any registered chemist or chemical technician, assist the illegal practice of chemistry by an unauthorized person, submit any false information or document to the board or commission to acquire a certificate of registration. Those who impersonates a registered chemist or a holder of temporary or special permit have convictions of imprisonment not less than 1 month but not more than 1 year, and fine of not less than 100,000 pesos but not more than 1 million pesos. Section 39 is the penal clause for chemical laboratories and related firms. This basically states that no chemical laboratory or firm shall undertake activities covered by this act without a valid authority to operate them. The conviction is that the president or the highest ranking officer shall be held liable, and imprisonment of not less than 1 month and not more than 1 year. The liable person should also make a fine of not less than 100,000 but not more than 1 million. So for Section 40, reports and other legal documents. These are the documents unsigned and with no affixed registration number and seal and official seal by a registered chemist and or chemical technician shall not be considered admissible for any legal purposes. Section 41, coverage of professional practice. This states that a licensed professional chemist shall not be prevented from the practice of chemistry so long that it is within the scope of the profession and any recognized allied profession. In Section 42, hazard pay, health and accident insurance, and legal assistance. This states that registered chemists and chemical technicians that are exposed to chemicals as part of their duty or responsibilities as chemists and chemical technicians are entitled with hazard pay and insurance. Registered chemists and chemical technicians who also face civil or criminal suits due to chemistry work done in good faith are also entitled to legal assistance, but this should be provided by their employer or the laboratory. Moving on to Article 5, Transitory Provisions. Section 43, Term of Office of Incumbent Board. This states that the incumbent chairperson and members of the board hold another 2 years from the date of effectivity of this act. The board shall also promulgate the provisions, rules, and regulations within this term. Section 44, Vested Rights Automatic Registration of Chemists and Chemical Technicians. This section covers that registered chemists and chemical technicians under Republic Act Number 754 at the time of effectivity of this act shall be considered registered and hold the same registration number. This means that the license they hold shall continue in force until the date of its expiry. For Section 45, Preparation of Seal of Registered Chemist. All registered chemists with a valid professional license shall obtain an official seal by the board, in which this seal should have a label Registered Chemist, the chemist's name, and the registration number. This shall be done within the 3 years from the date of the effectivity of this act. And their official reports and documents shall require the certification and signature of the chemist, the registered chemist, and this shall be stamped with a seal. Section 46, Grace Period. This states that 3 years grace period is given to comply with the act for both individuals and the institution. The same is applied to those who are teaching professional chemistry subjects, and during the time they must be able to fulfill the following: completion of 60 units of chemistry and professional chemistry subjects taken on before or after the date of effectivity in the undergraduate degree. Must have taken already teaching subjects for at least 3 years. Comply with other requirements or criteria set by the board to demonstrate competence in teaching these subjects. And lastly, actively participated in CPD for chemistry. Article 6 is the final provisions, where Section 7 is the implementing rules and regulations, IIR. This states that within 60 days, the IIR and Code of Ethics for the practice of chemistry shall be adopted and promulgated by the board. For Section 48, Appropriations, this covers that the chairperson of the PRC shall immediately include in the Commission's programs the implementation of this act, and the funding shall be included in the Annual General Appropriations Act. Section 49, Separability Clause. In this section, it is stated that any section declared unconstitutional or invalid shall not invalidate any other sections of the Act. Section 50, Repealing Clause. In this section, it is stated that Republic Act Number 754 and other laws, part of laws, orders, ordinances, or regulations in conflict with the provisions of this Act are repealed. And lastly, in Section 51, Effectivity, 15 days it is stated that within 50 days, the act shall take effect after its publication in official gazette or in newspapers of general circulations. During this time, we have covered the Republic Act number 10657, or the Professional Chemistry Law, wherein it is an act regulating and modernizing the practice of chemistry in the Philippines, repealing for the purpose Republic Act numbered 7554, and this act, the Republic Act number 10657, contains 6 articles, which are the title, Policy and Definitions; Article 2, Professional Regulatory Board of Chemistry; Article 3, Licensure Examination and Registration; Article 4, General Provisions; Article 5, Transitory Provisions; and Article 6, Final Revisions. This concludes our report for the Republic Act number 10657. Thank you for listening.